On today's episode, Week 6 waiver wire targets with FAAB bids. We have the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers on a bye. We unfortunately have a laundry list of injuries as well. We're going to break it down all here on the Regression to the Mean podcast. But before diving in, if you are watching this video right now, odds are you care a lot about fantasy football. If you care about fantasy football, you should be subscribing to the Regression to the Mean channel. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button, click the like button, and turn on those notifications. We're going to be coming to you 3 times a week to give Sunday recaps, waiver wire analysis, and weekly matchup previews. You are not going to want to miss out to this. We give you an edge. If you already are subscribing and you are viewing this video, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for being a member of the Mean Team. We're nothing without you guys. Week 6 waivers. We're looking to target players with sub 35% ownership on Sleeper. As is tradition, I cheated a bit today. We have a couple guys that I felt like needed to be called out that are owned over 50%. We'll dive in a bit there. Some stuff that we should be calling out. I already mentioned at the top, 2 bye weeks this week, the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we're going to need contingency plans for George Pickens. Pat Freiermuth's out. Deontay Johnson's out. You're not starting Kenny Pickett. You know, Jalen Warren, if you're desperate. Najee Harris, I guess you're looking for fill-ins there. You're also looking for fill-ins for Christian Watson. If you're in a 2 QB league, Jordan Love. Aaron Jones continues to be out and dealing with a hamstring situation, but probably looking to fill that void as well. I'd say on the injury front, that's where we're really feeling it. Key injuries to Anthony Richardson, who has a grade 3 AC joint sprain in his right throwing shoulder. He looks to be out for the time being. A lot of Twitter doctors, Twitter experts, they're saying he could be out until week 12 after the bye. We shall see more information to be seen there. Devin Achane is a player, too, that could be missing some time. Very murky on the status of his knee injury so far this season. This week, Mike McDaniel was speaking in some coded language about what was going on. I don't know what it is. Twitter doctors think could be an MCL sprain. He could play this week. He may sit out. So we may need to be filling a void there. Justin Jefferson injured his hamstring late in that game against the Kansas City Chiefs. He did not return. I don't expect Jefferson to be out there in week 6. Daniel Jones' neck injury. Reports are indicating here that Daniel Jones, who again is a borderline drop at this point, but Daniel Jones, who could be a speculative add with opportunity to actually do decently against the Commanders in week 7. Daniel Jones is supposed to play. Giants optimistic about him playing. Tank Dell entered the concussion protocol. I don't think he's going to play week 6 after getting a brain injury. I don't see it happening. The only person that's been cleared is Luke Musgrave, and the only reason he was cleared is because he got a concussion on Thursday. He played on Monday, so he had close to 2 weeks to recover from that concussion. So I'm not expecting Tank Dell to play. James Conner, not a lot of information on what's going on with James Conner's knee injury here. He played about 21% of the snaps in week 5. Left in what was a pretty juicy matchup against the Bengals. We'll be speaking a little bit later about his potential backup and replacement, but look out for more news about James Conner. There isn't a lot of information. You didn't even see him get hurt, but it was after a big run. The next guy worth keeping an eye on is Khalil Herbert. Reports are he's going to miss time with a high ankle sprain. Wouldn't be shocked if he landed on IR. That could be pointing at like maybe week 9, week 10 return for Khalil Herbert, and that's a dreaded injury. It really saps you of your athleticism. So we're hoping he's able to get back after that. The last injury to keep an eye on here is Travis Kelce. They play on Thursday. He picks up a DNP tag today on Monday, dealing with a low ankle sprain. That really looked awkward on that injury there. I don't know if he's going to miss much time. But it's something to keep in mind here that Kelce could miss. It is a short week. They're playing against a pretty terrible, Broncos team in defense. They may say Kelce sit this one out, get some rest. We're playing the Chargers. However, Travis Kelce's a maniac and he's going to want to play. So we'll keep our fingers crossed there on Kelce. I'm cautiously optimistic he's going to be able to go, but we shall see. Before moving on to players that we're picking up this week, we got to talk about some guys that I think are worth dropping. First and foremost, I would not have Dak Prescott on my roster moving forward. He really hasn't been able to give anything so far this season. We called it out in the week 5 preview. His defense has outscored him by like 7 points per game before the week 5 slaughter against the 49ers. I don't know where that lands out now. But it's not great for Dak Prescott so far this season. I would not be keeping him on my roster. Another guy that I'm pretty good to drop at this point and who's been ultra disappointing is Brandon Cooks. 3.7, 6.7, 2.3. It just doesn't look good for Cooks. It does not look like he has a rapport with Dak, and it doesn't really look like they know how to use him. He might just be dust. It is time to cut bait with Brandon Cooks. Another guy worth dropping is Dalvin Cook. We all saw how good Breece Hall looked in week 5. I just don't imagine a world where Dalvin Cook is going to continue to see more snaps as Breece gets healthier. They play the Eagles next week. That's a tough matchup. Then they go on a bye. You don't need this guy on your roster. He's basically just a stash for Breece Hall in case something happens to Breece. And even then, Michael Carter factors to work in. So I'm good. You can cut Dalvin Cook. Dak is dust. Brandon Cooks is dusty. Dalvin Cook's the dustiest if I were going to pick it. So dusty, dustiest in terms of rankings of droppability. Another one is Matt Breida. I just don't know how much he's rostered right now, and I'm pulling this up here. Rostered in 42% of leagues. He scores 10 points in week 3, 12 in week 4. He's lost a ton of touches to Eric Gray in this one in a pretty soft matchup. Saquon should be coming back pretty soon. There's no need to have Breida on your roster if he can't even outtouch Eric Gray against the Dolphins. And then the last guy, I called him out, worth dropping. It's time to drop Sky Moore. Sky Moore is he just might not be good. Again, Dak is dust. Brandon Cooks is dusty. Dalvin Cook's the dustiest. Matt Breida, not even worth really discussing. Sky Moore is like the Earth's core level of dust. Get him off your roster. He does not belong on your fantasy football team. All right, week 6 waiver FAAB bids. You know the drill if you've been following along to this channel. 35% ownership. We're going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to start off here with running back, considering I think that is probably the most important position to fill on the waivers, in my opinion. My number one priority here on the waiver wire this week is Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears is rostered in 36% of leagues. When I'm looking at Tyjae Spears, I'm looking at a semi-aggressive bid of around 15% of your FAAB. Here's really the reason why. Here's Tyjae's splits versus Derrick Henry this season. 51% of the snaps to Derrick Henry's 57, 21% of the attempts to Derrick Henry's 68%. And by attempts, I mean overall rushing and receiving attempts. 41% of the routes to 26 for Henry, 13% of the targets to 6% for Henry. Tyjae's expected fantasy points per game, 9.2. Derrick Henry's expected fantasy points per game, 13.5. So Derrick Henry, by far and away, is the starter in this offense. I am making no claims that he is not. However, this is much more of a timeshare than I think a lot of us were expecting heading into this season. Tyjae's looked very effective when given the opportunity and given the ball this season. And I think that his role is pretty clear. When the Titans are losing, Tyjae is going to be involved to a high degree. And when the Titans are winning, it's going to be the King Henry show, kind of putting away games. I think Spears offers flex appeal weekly in a pinch, especially with buys and injuries. But I think if anything were to happen to Derrick Henry, who's in his 8th season and has a ton of mileage, Tyjae has kind of like that league winning, and I know it sounds a little cringy to say league winning, but bear with me, mean team. I think he has that kind of league winning upside. So I'm going with Tyjae Spears here as my number one priority at running back. Next guy that I'm really going to get, I don't know if I'm going to get aggressive with, but someone that I think really you should be targeting at running back is Jeff Wilson Jr. So Jeff Wilson, he's rostered in 24% of sleeper leagues right now. I wouldn't be super aggressive, but like with Tyjae where it's a 15% bid, I'm looking at 8 to 10% FAAB bid with Jeff Wilson. I have no idea if Achane is going to miss time, but I wouldn't be shocked if Jeff Wilson makes his way into this backfield, makes this more of like a three-headed committee, which would not be that ideal. And if Achane were to miss time, Jeff Wilson last season, if we pull that up here, he really was kind of the preferred running back down the stretch. He really was an awesome pickup here for multiple weeks. If he were to be able to stay healthy, he would split that backfield pretty evenly, in my opinion, with Raheem Mostert. And I think it would make a ton of sense if you had Achane to have Jeff Wilson as your insurance option. He needs to be rostered. He's a stash, but if Achane goes down, Mostert goes down, I mean, you're looking at a top 24 running back play weekly. So I would look to prioritize Jeff Wilson. I wouldn't get super aggressive. I'm a 49er fan. I watched a ton of Jeff Wilson. I've always been a little bit of a hater on the guy, even though he's a good player, runs violently. I think he brings a good attitude and toughness. But again, Raheem Mostert, in my opinion, has always been a better running back than Jeff Wilson. But I think it would make sense to make a play with him on the wire, 8 to 10%. Don't get too aggressive. The next guy that I think is worth picking up here at running back is Kendre Miller. So Kendre Miller's rostered in about 22% of sleeper leagues. I'm looking at a 5 to 8% bid here on Kendre Miller. He's really more of a stash play, in my opinion. Kamara is the lead back, but Miller had a nice week 5, and because of that usage and because he looked good in this role, I really do think he merits a bench stash. In week 5, 35% of the snaps, 28% of the attempts, 30% of the routes, 15% of the targets, 15% target share is great. This game got out of hand. You know, I don't know the splits between Kamara and Miller in garbage time. I'm sure that probably played into it. He had the 14th most expected fantasy points in week 5, finished with the 15th most, so he was efficient in the opportunities he was given. I think he's very much worth a stash, but I mean, this is Kamara's backfield pretty clearly here. The next guy, he's probably the headliner, and that's the Emari Demercado, the guy who backed up Kendre Miller at TCU. 24-year-old rookie, undrafted player, 2% rostered. He was pretty good when he played. He got around 77% of the snaps with James Conner going down early. Demercado finished with 77% of the snaps, as I said, 45% of the attempts, 63% of the routes, 9% of the targets. That's a pretty damn good role for Demercado. He looked pretty good when given the opportunity. I think they just have a good run game, to be quite frank here with the Cardinals and what they're running out there. You know, if James Conner were to miss time, I wouldn't be shocked if Demercado split touches with Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore's an interesting guy we're taking a look at too. Don't know if I get super crazy with Rondale, but I think Rondale is going to figure into this rushing attack if Conner were to miss time. But in week 5, Demercado had the 11th most valuable role amongst running backs. So you got to take that seriously. They've got a matchup against the Rams coming up. I have no idea if Conner is going to continue to miss time. And again, Demercado is the third running back. Typically, Keontae Ingram was inactive as well. So I don't know Keontae Ingram's status. You're kind of wading through the waters here in terms of who you're going to work with. And that's why I'm not going to get super aggressive with this one. 3 to 6% FAAB bid. This seems like kind of a bit of a trap, but he was efficient. He had a great role. We like this rush offense. It's worth a dart throw and a speculative start if Conner were to miss time. But again, 3 to 6% of your FAAB. Don't get too crazy here. The one that's cheating that's over 305. I mean, I'm sorry. Fucking me. Oh my God. I'm not used to doing this by myself. The one that's over 35% is Roschon Johnson at 52% here. So Khalil Herbert's set to miss around like 2 to 3 weeks with a high ankle sprain. He would be a plug and play every week starter if Herbert is out, in my opinion. Roschon's looked pretty good in the limited opportunities he's gotten, especially in garbage time as a pass catcher. He's going to split time with Dante Foreman. Dante Foreman was a healthy scratch. So I'm curious to know how this shakes out. Johnson did leave last Thursday's game with a concussion, so we'll keep an eye on his status. But remember, Luke Musgrave, he had a concussion last Thursday. He was able to actually come out and play this week against the Raiders. I think it's a possibility that Roschon plays this week, given that he has extra time to clear protocol. this is how the Bears offense has worked for the past couple of years. Last year Monty would get 2 drives, Herbert would get 1. This year it's been Herbert gets 2, Johnson gets 1. I'm expecting Johnson to get 2 and Dante Foreman to get 1. Could we get rug pulled and Foreman gets 2 and Johnson gets 1? It's a possibility, and Johnson just stays in his role as, the garbage time back or the receiver back. I would expect Shaun to get more carries than Dante Foreman. Johnson's roster in 51% of leagues. If he's dropped 15%, I'd get semi-aggressive. He's a rookie. He's looked good. We liked him as a prospect coming out of Texas. So I like the play. I think this offense is ascending to a degree. I think Justin Fields looks good. So why not get the running back attached to Justin Fields? And then Dante Foreman, 14% rostered. I would not spend much, but Johnson, if he doesn't clear concussion protocol, Foreman would be set to take on a decent amount of touches against Minnesota. So I don't know. Foreman is the least priority. Running it back here. Tyjae, number 1 priority. Wilson, number 2. Kendre Miller, number 3. Demercado, number 4. I'd bump Shaun all the way up here to number probably 1. I'd have Shaun here number 1, but he's rostered in 52% of leagues. So that's why I'm adding him here at the end. But that's running back. It's not great, folks. It really isn't. Bench stashes and dart throws. You got Johnson and Demercado potentially spot starts, and the rest are really just dart throws. Wide receiver, it really isn't great either, guys. I'm just going to be super blunt with you, but we're on the Regression of the Mean channel. We're all about making lemonade out of lemons. I got to learn that phrase. I keep fucking that up. Okay, so the first priority here at wide receiver, I think this one's pretty easy. You're going to see this across a decent amount of lists. It's Josh Downs. So the last 2 weeks, Josh Downs has emerged as the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense. He's rostered in 27% of leagues. I would be pretty aggressive with Downs, 15 to 18%. I'd be aggressive for a couple reasons. Roll and then upside if anything were to happen with Pittman. Also, I just don't think Alec Pierce is that good, and Downs is already emerging as a better option than Pierce. So over the last 2 weeks, Downs has 17% of the targets. He's first in team receiving yardage share. He's first in yards per route run. He's first in yards per target. He's second in air yard share, and he's first in fantasy points and second in expected fantasy points. And this is amongst Colts pass catchers. It's a slam dunk for Downs, in my opinion. He's garnering more downfield targets. He was an excellent slot receiver coming out of UNC. He's been super solid to start this year, and I think his game works pretty well with Gardner Minshew, and we're expecting Gardner Minshew for the foreseeable future. So I think he pairs pretty well. I think he's worth picking up. He's kind of a nice little start in a pinch out of the flex. And you heard this last week when I poetically waxed about Michael Wilson, who finished with 2.8 fantasy points this week. But I'm all about young wide receivers. Downs really hasn't had his breakout yet. I think his breakout's coming. So I like Josh Downs a ton. I'd say he's probably the number 1 priority on the wire. I have another guy who's my number 1 priority, and I'll get to it a little bit later. The second wide receiver that I'm taking a look at here is Curtis Samuel. So Curtis Samuel is rostered in 28% of leagues. I'm looking at a 5 to 8% bid. Oh, and on Downs, 15 to 18% FAAB bid. Curtis Samuel rostered again, 27% of leagues, 5 to 8% FAAB bid. Over the past 2 weeks, Curtis Samuel is the wide receiver 12 with wide receiver 13 usage, much to the chagrin of Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, bag holders. He has the same target share as Jahan Dotson, a higher yards per route run than both Terry McLaurin and Dotson. He has the same amount of targets as Dotson, and he has the same target per route run as Terry. These guys are like all having very similar roles. He's running clearly the third target in terms of routes behind, shockingly, Dotson, McLaurin, and Logan Thomas. But the way that they use him is really creative. He's an efficient player. 18 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks, 7+ targets in back-to-back weeks. He's looked really good, and Sam Howell clearly trusts him. He's a weekly flex consideration, especially with bye weeks coming up and injuries. Don't get too crazy, though, because I wouldn't be shocked if in week 6, 7, and 8 he returns back to scoring 6 or 7 points, but he's cleared over 11 fantasy points in 3 out of 5 matchups. That's pretty damn solid for Curtis Samuel there. I don't know if the last guy here, but the one that people are going to be talking about a decent amount is KJ Osborn. Oh, geez. I'm not the biggest Osborn fan. Not a big believer in really his talent. And I've been frustrated that Jordan Addison's been a clear 3 to KJ Osborn this season. He's rostered in 17% of leagues. I'm talking 3 to 5% FAAB bid here, people. But he does have a pretty soft matchup against the Chicago Bears in week 6. We don't know the status yet of Justin Jefferson. I would be shocked if he's out there in week 6. The Vikings have one of the highest pass rates in the NFL this season. I think Jordan Addison is going to be the prime beneficiary of, Jefferson being out. But KJ Osborn runs a ton of routes. He's on the field a ton. He saw 9 targets in this game, especially with Jefferson out, and he ducked at a target in the end zone. He was scared of the ball coming at him. Not a great look for Osborn. Again, I don't think he's that great of a football player, but the volume is probably going to be there. You could start him in a pinch, honestly. The last one here, and I would put 0 to 1% FAAB, but I just want to throw out a deep, deep, deep sleeper here for the sickos. I'm in a couple sicko leagues where I definitely am just desperately looking for another person to throw in the flex with these big rosters. Trenton Irwin, he's rostered in 0% of leagues, started in 0% of leagues. This is probably one of the grosser recommendations I've ever made on this channel. But this dude was a problem in week 5. With T. Higgins out, 21% of the target share, 10 targets on 19% of the team receiving yard share, 31% of the air yard share, 14 fantasy points with the 15th most expected fantasy points on the week. He also had a 26% first read share. He was the clear number 2 behind Ja'Marr Chase in this offense this week. That does not look good for Tyler Boyd. It's probably more telling that you should go drop Tyler Boyd because Tyler Boyd wasn't able to produce with T. Higgins out of the lineup. Actually, you probably should just drop Tyler Boyd. But Trenton Irwin, I don't know if this is sticky or not, but they haven't been able to really do anything behind Ja'Marr Chase this season. Higgins has really only been good in 1 game. Irv Smith hasn't gotten anything done. Joe Burrow looks healthier. Maybe this is a flash in the pan, but this is a little bit of an interesting dart throw here, especially if you're playing in really deep leagues and you need something in a pinch. But that's it. Not great. Really not great. If you come over here in trends, who's trending up at wide receiver? Curtis Samuel, Josh Downs. Josh Reynolds, he looked really good, but he's rostered in 53% of leagues. Maybe somebody dropped him. He's worth picking up here. Jaden Reed, that Packers offense doesn't look that great. They're coming off a bye. I like Jaden Reed talent, but it kind of looks like all targets here are consolidating to Christian Watson with him back in the fold. So I don't know. This is a bummer, and this is a real bummer here going to the next position. And I'm really in a difficult spot here with Anthony Richardson set to miss time. I have situations where Daniel Jones is my backup and he's injured. So this is a nightmare. And I'd say my number 1 priority this week would be Sam Howell. He really would be. And it's not the best matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. He's rostered in 36% of leagues. I'm looking at a 5 to 8% bid here. Over the past 2 weeks, though, Sam Howell's been the QB5 in fantasy. Atlanta, again, isn't the best matchup for QBs, but they aren't a bad one. His next 4 games, Falcons, Giants, Eagles, Patriots, all of these are pretty decent matchups, to be frank here. I think you can start him confidently. It's kind of like, remember Mitch Trubisky back in the day? And I know they went to UNC, so it's a lazy comp, but remember starting Mitch Trubisky back in the day? And it was like, it didn't look pretty, but you'd look up and he'd have like 20 fantasy points. I mean, outside of that terrible Buffalo game, and this is what Buffalo does to quarterbacks, they make it very hard for them in fantasy. He's been legit. He really has been. So I'd say he's my number 1 priority this week. Bummer, but that's where we're at here in the season. 2 other quarterbacks that I definitely think are worth taking a look at that are rostered in over 50% of leagues. The first one is Matthew Stafford. So 55% rostered, 29% started. So there's plenty of people playing Stafford on Sleeper. He's 4th in passing yards this season, but he's 22nd in passing touchdowns. His career, he's averaged a 4.6 TD percentage. This year, he's averaging a 2.5 TD percentage. Regression is coming. I'd say Matthew Stafford is a prime positive regression candidate. Shout out the Regression to the Mean podcast, baby. If you haven't subscribed, you know what to do. Thank you so much. He is now facing off against a Cardinals defense that has surrendered the 6th most passing touchdowns this season and the 4th most passing yards. This is the ideal streamer. If he's out there, pick up Stafford. You're replacing Richardson, I think, with ease with Matthew Stafford, in my opinion. And, Pitt's kind of a decent matchup. Dallas is whatever. Like, he's got some decent opportunities. And with Cooper Kupp back, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, these are just hilarious names. And Tyler Higbee. It's a really solid pass-catching core that they've assembled around Stafford. Keep him upright. I think he's going to be passing the ball a shit ton. The last guy that I'm picking up here, and a lot of people might have dropped him, but, 59%. He's rostered in 59% of leagues. He was on a bye, 4% started. What are we doing here, people? Cincinnati's not a great matchup against quarterbacks, but he gets Arizona the next week, and we just highlighted that Arizona is a pretty cheddar matchup. 5 to 8%, similar for Matthew Stafford, 5 to 8%. So all these quarterbacks, 5 to 8% FAAB. It's been a weird year for Geno. They've been pretty run heavy. They've also lost like 4 out of 5 starters on this offensive line. They're coming off a bye. I expect their offensive line to get better. Cincinnati's been relatively solid against quarterbacks. Arizona's a pretty juicy matchup. I just feel like I could trust Geno Smith as like a good quarterback. And I think some of the stats are going to come along as the season comes along. And he's somebody, if I put him in my lineup, I feel a lot better about it, like, than Sam Howell. I just don't think that I'm going to turn on the TV and see Geno Smith throw his 4th interception, or Sam Howell. You're clearly going to see it. So, because he did it against the Bills. So I just think he's safer. I don't honestly, the ceiling feels better with Sam Howell. It's again, this is a really sad place to be if you have Anthony Richardson bags here. But I think he's worth picking up as an ideal Richardson replacement. But 59% roster, like we're cheating here. We clearly are. The last one, and this is for the sickos, right? This is truly a sicko recommendation here. One of the guys I've sent to fantasy jail several times, somebody who, his crimes against fantasy, we've got the Geneva Convention talking about it here. He's rostered in 12% of leagues, but that's Desmond Ridder. I'm talking 1% to 2%. People, do not get crazy with Mr. Ridder. He looked really good, though, against Houston, and Houston's been a good defense against quarterbacks. 28 for 37, 329, a touchdown. He had a rushing touchdown as well. No one wins there. The Commanders just let Justin Fields throw for 4 touchdowns. Ridder has 2 starts where he scored over 22 fantasy points. He has 3 where he's gone under 9. 2 of those 22-point games have happened at home, though. Ridder's playing Washington at home. This is bottom of the barrel stuff. You're in a desperate situation here, but if you had to take a complete flyer dart throw on somebody this week, especially in a 2 QB league potentially, I like Desmond Ridder. I can't believe it. This is a dark time for the Regression to the Mean channel when I'm out here pumping up Desmond Ridder. So I have Sam Howell 5 to 8%, Matthew Stafford 5 to 8%, Geno Smith 5 to 8%. I think I like Sam Howell. I like his ceiling the most, but I just think he's going to be kind of volatile. Matthew Stafford seems pretty damn safe, honestly. I'm just worried about his offensive line. And Geno Smith kind of seems like a buy low. If he's on the wire because someone got impatient with his performance this season, I would scoop him up relatively confidently. Moving on to tight ends here. This is really, I don't know. The tight ends are relatively interesting this week. I know this is gross, guys. If you're following along here, we appreciate you. You are my kind of people. If you're this far and you're thinking about streaming some tight ends this week, first recommendation here is Dalton Schultz, rostered in 44% of leagues, started in 18% of sleeper leagues. So kind of cheating. He's really come on the last 2 weeks, 13.2 points, 19.5 points. He's averaged the fourth most fantasy points per game at the tight end position during this stretch. Tank Dell's in concussion protocol. Robert Woods is dealing with a rib injury. We could see a healthy amount of targets here. He saw 10 targets against the Falcons. Now, the Falcons have hemorrhaged points to tight ends this season, and we'll get into that a little bit later with the next recommendation. He plays against the Saints. The Saints are pretty stout against tight ends, but this is the tight end position. I really think you could do worse than starting Dalton Schultz here before the bye. It would make a ton of sense if Tank Dell and Robert Woods don't play this week against the Saints. This is at home. I kind of like Dalton Schultz. 10 targets, people. 10 targets. We're going to run with that, all right? We're going to run with that whenever a tight end sees 10 targets. The last recommendation here at tight end is none other than 32-year-old converted cornerback Logan Thomas, who had 11 targets in week 5, which is kind of bonkers. This season, he is the tight end 11, and he's on tight end 7 usage, which is pretty remarkable if you dive into it, considering Logan Thomas has basically been hurt for like 2 years. He plays the Falcons, a team that has surrendered close to 18 fantasy points per game to tight ends in week 6. 11 targets in week 5. Yeah, I mean, he's about as good as a streamer as you're going to get. He's rostered in 20% of leagues, 3% of FAAB on Logan Thomas, 5% on Dalton Schultz. Don't get too crazy here, folks. Don't get too crazy. It's a wild world out there when we're recommending Logan Thomas and we're recommending Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz is somebody who's been pretty relevant. I'm trying to think here. Jonnu Smith is he continues to be pretty relevant. He's rostered in 23% of leagues. Week 2, 8.7 points. Week 3, 8.7 points. Week 4, 15.5. Week 5, 10.7. Kyle Pitts is starting to emerge a little bit, so I think that's making us cool off of Jonnu, but he's the tight end 13 on the season. You probably can do worse at the tight end position, considering Washington just got gashed by Cole Kmet in week 5 against the Bears. Last one here is Luke Musgrave. They're going on a bye, but Musgrave continues to have a pretty damn good role. Scored 19.4 fantasy points. If I'm looking at Jonnu, I'm looking at 1 to 2% of FAAB. Don't get crazy. Luke Musgrave, I'd bump him up to probably 4 to 5%, considering he's a rookie, but he's looked pretty good when he's been on the field. He's had now 3 out of his 5 games where he's gone over 8 fantasy points at the tight end position. We're going to take that and run with it every day of the week. Wow. That's some good stuff, people. We appreciate you for following along, supporting the Mean Team. If you got any questions, lineup decisions, you can drop them in the comments below on this video. You can also reach out to us at RTM Fantasy on Twitter. Give us a follow on TikTok if that's how you consume short form content. And if you like Instagram Reels, we're there too. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate you. Keegan and Aiden, I don't like doing this without you. We're going to be getting him back for the Week 6 preview, and we are close to 100 episodes. We're close to 100 episodes, people. That is insane. Thank you so much for following along, jumping on this train, going on this journey with us, with me. It's been an incredible, incredible time so far, and we're only getting started. We got fantasy leagues to win. We got money to take home. We have friends we got to beat. We are just getting started, ladies and gentlemen. There are no ladies listening to this, just gentlemen. All right, everybody, until next time.